Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. It's time for this week's episode of One Last Thing with co-host Slava Cooperstein. Slava, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. Another great week for the Ravens. How about you?
All kinds of fun. Loving life. We're at the top of the wave right now, just enjoying our position, as precarious as it might be in terms of the future of this season. At some point very close, we're going to come to a point where the season either continues or ends very abruptly for teams when the playoffs come, and possibly even before then in terms of a big elimination game of some sort. So really enjoying this position right now, enjoying watching other football games too, as we've seen this week.
Yeah, Ken, absolutely. I do think it's incumbent upon us to offer our sincere condolences to Ravens fans who don't want us to get the first seed. I feel for them. It must be very difficult to know that we're inching towards that goal every week.
Yes, well, I have less things that I'll give up on trying to generally have that argument with the entire general population of Twitter, because it's really just a subset of people who really don't want the number one seed. But they're managing their own expectations. They're dealing with success in a way that works for them, and it's a tough place to be. But believe me, being at the bottom of that wave and having it ready to crash on top of you is a lot worse. So Ravens are in a good space here.
Definitely.
All right. Well, we're gonna talk about something fun, and this was Slava's idea to talk about the Wallace kick return and punt return, and where it fits among the great kick returns in Ravens history. And by the way, we decided to include all kick returns of all types. Anytime the ball was kicked and the Ravens ended up scoring, that's a kick return touchdown. So
that's right.
And that includes a bunch of plays, right, Slava?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If a foot touches the ball and then the Ravens score, we considered it, and we have some great ones to go through.
All right, so we're going to do some honorable mentions. Each of us had the exact same top five, but we had a ton of honorable mentions that don't make the list. And the fact that these plays don't make the list is a testament to what Ravens history has been. And if you weren't appreciating it, take a moment with us to appreciate just how great Ravens history has been, because there are a ton of honorable mention plays. I'll go through two right away, and then you do two, and we'll so we go a little quicker on this.
Sure.
One that's way down on the list is Lamont Brightful's 95-yard punt return versus the Bengals in 2003. Special return, and you rarely see a punt return that long, but it was a cool one. There was another one in a preseason game that I could point to where Jermaine Lewis, I think, had a 97-yard punt return for a touchdown. So whenever you see those kind of things happening, just very special. I'll just stop at two honorable mentions. Let you throw out a couple now.
Yeah. So two that I would definitely include are the kickoff return by Jacoby Jones versus Minnesota in the 2013 snow game, which if people will recall, I had 5 lead changes in the last 3 minutes, and I think Marlon Brown, capping off of Marlon Brown, getting the final touchdown, toe tapping in the back of the end zone. Yep. Really a really fantastic and fun game in a somewhat disappointing 2013 season. But yeah, Jacoby Jones, Mr. 108 himself, getting that kick return was the third of those 5 lead changes. So that's one of them. And another one is the blocked punt for 6 by Ed Reed in 2003 versus Seattle. Triggered the massive comeback down 17. I believe Anthony Wright helmed the quarterback position for that game, and just real highlight of that season. And if I recall correctly, he was going to have a child.
Anthony Wright, yes, that night.
Anthony Wright, yeah, that's right. Yeah, just to be clear, talking about Anthony Wright that night. So it was a very special day for him, and just one of those guys that you're always going to have affection for in Ravens history.
Yeah. That's just still one of the most incredible games. All kinds of parallels to this game today in terms of the sound and the noise of the crowd in a half-empty stadium was just remarkable that day. Another one, it can't make the list for importance of the game, but it was still really cool and special. And I believe is the only other time the Ravens have won the game on a kick of any sort was the blocked field goal 6 by Will Hill in 2015. Brent Urban playing his first game, blocked the kick, goes over to Will Hill, who scooped and scored, and his big moment as a Raven, and that was pretty cool. To go to another one that I would have on the list, it would be the BJ Sams fake reverse to Deion Sanders in the 2004 game at Washington. The Ravens came back on defense and special teams in that game from 10-0 down. Ed Reed had a strip sack and took it into the end zone himself. It was a four-fecta or whatever you want to call it. It's not a trifecta anymore, right? Whatever they call it, a four-way like that. And then Sams had the other big play in the game, which was this punt return that was a fake reverse to Deion. They were both back there, and that was just a very memorable play.
Yeah, and if anybody hasn't seen the Will Hill play in particular, the kick 6 against Cleveland, I'd recommend going on YouTube and watching. It's a great call on the broadcast. It's very exciting, and it's just like just an incredible feat of athleticism and a highlight in a disappointing 2015 season.
Mm-hmm. More honorable mentions?
I think I'm tapped out. You got any more, Ken?
I got a couple. Jermaine Lewis had 2 games with 2 punt return touchdowns, and you gotta mention those. He had 6 total punt return touchdowns for the Ravens, but he had a pair against the Jets in the final game of 2000. He had a pair against Seattle in that 1997 win. The 1997 win was a close game, 31-24. It was a really nice win for the Ravens in their early history that is largely forgotten, but they beat Warren Moon in that game. And Michael McCrary was having kind of a little bit of a revenge game versus the Seattle team that had let him walk after the 96 season. So positive things on that. And then that 2000 season finale, of course, the Jets passed all over the Ravens during that game for over 500 offensive yards. And people were wondering, is the 2000 Ravens defense broken? We found out over the next 4 weeks, it wasn't. It was perfectly fine. But despite all of the passing yards, and Vinny Testaverde had 69 passing attempts that day, he also turned the ball over, I believe, 6 times in the game, or the Jets did turn it over 6 times. And so the Ravens only had 5 or 6 first downs in the entire game, but they won the game 34-20 with a 98-yard pick 6, these 2 punt returns, a stifling defensive effort in the second half, in particular, to get the ball turned over with short fields and whatnot. But a pretty incredible game of its own. And by the way, you can watch that one out on YouTube too. It's worth a walk.
One of the most statistically Baltimore games of all time.
Yeah.
And I lied. I do have one more honorable mention. That was the David Reed return for a touchdown. I believe it was a punt return. Could have been a kickoff return, but I believe it was a punt return. And it was just kind of a nifty sort of like him slide, breaking tackles and slipping through tackles, taking it back for a touchdown. If I recall correctly, also that game ended in a this would have been 2010.
Yep.
And it ended in a walk-off touchdown, pick 6 by Josh Wilson, former Terp, intercepting Matt Schaub at the very end of the game to win it.
Yeah, that was in that Houston game. You're exactly right. It's kickoff return, and that is the game. I remember that game very fondly, walking out of that, and after Wilson had got the pick 6 down in Houston. That was a great game.
I don't know why, but the image of like Matt Schaub looking like incredibly disappointed, and then like Suggs coming up and giving him a hug. I mean, it's just like indelible. It is like burned into my mind, and I don't know why, but it is. I like Josh Wilson. He's a guy I'll always remember. And that's just how the brain works, I guess.
Great ball player. And there's a term that came out of that pick 6 that I still take. And by the way, Gruden kind of invented the term kick 6. First time I ever heard it on the Will Hill touchdown. But there's a term that came out that I now use all the time, and it's flotation device. It's a ball that hangs in the air too long. Wilson intercepted it and took it back as just remarkably apt description of it. Well, let's get right into our top 5. Your category. You name number 5, I'll do number 4, and so on.
Yeah, number 5 is one of my absolute favorites. It's Chris McAllister. Chris McAllister's return of a field goal against Denver in 2002. if I recall correctly, we beat Denver pretty handily in this game. And so it really makes this list the top 5 on the sheer coolness of the play. It was a very long field goal that Denver was trying for. McAllister was lined up in the end zone, in case that it didn't make it. And sure enough, it didn't. And the coolest thing about this play, really, I think, is Ray Lewis, basically, being there on special teams, close to the end zone, lined up as McAllister's sort of personal protector, and just laying just the most vicious special teams block decleater that you will ever see. I mean, John Madden was on the call and he's like, I don't, the other commentator was like, I'll do one of yours. Boom. Right. I mean, that, I don't know how that guy got up, but McAllister takes down the sideline for a touchdown. It's a great play.
The sort of block that would have dislocated everything in his body. It was a airborne block. The guy had no way he could see it. So he was blocking away from the line of scrimmage, which I think is legal. So hopefully, anyway, it was a legal block because it's one of the great ones of all time. Didn't go helmet to helmet or anything like that. Just caught him in the center of mass and launched him. And I'm forgetting who the player that he did that to was, but that was fun. The other thing was really fun about it and helped Lewis line up that block was the fact that McAllister kind of initially walked forward, indicating, he's not going to run the ball out. And then Lewis is signaling him, on the play. Right. And then all of a sudden he moves and boom, the hit comes on the defenseless, I'll call him the unaware Denver player. Put the Ravens up 31-3 at the half of a game they were a heavy underdog in, and really started 2002 into being a very cool, although down year of rebuilding, where they went 7-9. They established a number of defensive stars that year, even though they played the worst defense that the franchise has pretty much ever played. They were 22nd in the league, and in defensive DeVoe, I believe they might have been 22nd, but they're 22nd in terms of yards or some such. But it was it was a fun year despite it, and it was a great game that night.
Something very special about those Ravens teams with McAllister and Reed and Ray is that they really did have kind of a mind meld. Sort of there were a lot of very special plays that you would see, two or three of those guys involved in making it work because they reacted so well to one of those guys making a play. The transitional defense was really
fast
really
break
special.
Offense. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's it. Well, I'll do number 4, and number 4 I think is Sunday's punt 6 by Tylan Wallace. We had the exact same top 5, so neither of us had to change their list at all for this. It is a special play, a game-ending play. I love the fact that the Ravens celebrated like hell. It was a little bit moderately some sportsmanship issues getting back to the middle of the field to shake hands with the opponent after the win, but that's what happens when you have an exciting thing like this. And fortunately, there are a couple assistant coaches who hung back and were able to tap Stafford on the stomach as he's standing there at midfield, tapping his foot, waiting for Lamar Jackson to come back and shake his hand. Harbaugh had an interesting comment about it. But Wallace, a lot of great things about this play. I thought one of the interesting things is how Harbaugh sees what he wants to see on the tape after the game. He talks about Kolar making a perfectly legal C-patch block. I think the C-patch refers to, it's the first time I've ever heard this term used, is the captain's patch is typically in the upper right shoulder of the player. And so a C-patch blocks mean you get around the guy to that part of the body where you can legally hit him as opposed to blocking from behind. Well, Kolar pretty clearly a block in the back on that play. And it didn't get called, which is fortunate because the Ravens got some really bad calls against them the rest of the game. But Harbaugh calling it a C-patch block afterwards. Interesting terminology I'd never heard before, and actually very funny in terms of being revisionist about the play itself.
Yeah, I honestly, I think the better argument, because I was trying to, figure it out myself. I was like, oh my God, they're going to throw a flag on that. But when I watch it again, I mean, it does seem that the player is like diving at that point.
Yes,
so I think I think that unless it was the ref just missing it, I think, a ref might have just seen like he's already diving for the player. So it's not really a block in the back. Like he's not actually like even if he made contact, he's really not affecting the play in any kind of way. That's sort of what I thought. But yeah, this is a really important play, both in terms of importance to deciding the game, right? Like it did decide the game completely and totally, and it also very important in this part of the season in helping determine the Ravens playoff seeding, and also just has the benefit of just being a really remarkable play on its own merit. There are probably 3 or 4 times that Wallace could have fallen to the ground and almost did, but he kept his balance. He slipped past a couple of tackles, and the call was great too. So really, this one had everything other than not being a playoff game.
Willing him to stay up. What it felt like was watching the movie. What's the movie with Robin Williams and Kirk Russell where they go back to play the high school football game again that they've lost? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the thing. Maybe you could look it up for us while you're just making this point. Is on the ultimate play where Robin Williams gets to come back in the game and play a wide receiver against Dr. Death, who's going to try and knock him right off his pins at the line of scrimmage. He gets free at the line of scrimmage and makes a move, and then the ball comes to him and he can't kind of find it, and then he gets it. And he's all completely in the open field, but the ball's kind of behind him and whatnot. That's kind of what I thought when I'm watching Wallace keep his feet down the sidelines. There's nobody near him. He's got the greatest block in the world from Will Hill on the not Will Hill, from Justice Hill on the punter.
Yeah,
it's just he maintained that whole thing. He completely pivoted him around, so it's a fantastic block. But it had all of those qualities to it about all the times he might have gone down.
The best of times, by the
That's
way,
it.
is the movie I look for. Excuse me. Yeah, no, great play, and an instant classic for sure. So going to number three would be Jacoby Jones in the a kickoff return to start the second half in Super Bowl in 2012, and just a fantastic, remarkable return right up the middle. It's a cool play because the Ravens were able to exploit a little-known kind of special teams rule where you could have two of your special teams players hold up one of the opposing players. Like two of them kind of pin a player and hold them up. That's a technique that was allowed at the time, and you were allowed to do that. So they did that with great success to allow Jacoby Jones to knife through the middle. And my God, by the time he got through the middle, he was. I mean, I would be interested to know what the top speed was on that, because cool. he was just like a gazelle, just zooming past everybody, and nobody. There was just no chance anybody was going to catch him. It was. I think Jacoby Jones touched the ball twice in that Super Bowl, and I think both of those resulted in a touchdown, which is a pretty cool statistic. I think the importance of it can sort of be undervalued a little bit because of how high, how much we were leading in the beginning of that game. But what this really did, turns out, instead of just turning a solid lead into a blowout, what it really did was give the Ravens the margin of error, every bit of which they needed. Yep. After the lights went out. Still looking for a good explanation for how all that went down, but no, I mean the Ravens needed every bit of that to hold on from a furious 49ers comeback.
Right. Now, I had an interesting kind of perspective on this game, and I completely agree with everything you said. That Super Bowl was fantastic in terms of its highs and lows and peaks and troughs, and coming back and getting Ray Lewis the 3-down stop on second and 5, 3rd and 5, and 4th and 5. Yep. To have him finish the game was the greatest individual finish for a player in all of sports history, I would argue. And Ted Williams homered in his last at bat in a meaningless game, 161, or 159, right, or whatever it was. There are players who've gone out, at a similar level, but that one is the greatest, series of plays for the last three of a career that I think you could point to. He had individual contributions to all of them in terms of being in the right spot in coverage, setting Donnell Ellerbe up for the game-winning pressure and whatnot. But anyway, that game was very special to me from that regard, and that cushion obviously is part of what made it special. Jones, I guess the other perspective I think is important to me, I love this story, is I was sitting next to Harry Swain's wife for the game. We were just in a Ravens section, nothing planned or anything. Just happened to sit next to her. She had a bunch of kids with her and was managing them, and they were honestly not as into the game as they probably should have been. But she introduced herself, told me what was going on and whatnot. And her immediate reaction when the lights went out, she did two things. She wrote down the numbers of her phone on her kids' hands, which was really smart. There's some, kids were like 5 and 6 years old there. You don't want to get them getting lost in the Superdome somehow in that melee. But the other thing she did, she's immediately empathic about this situation. So there's a bunch of Ravens fans around cursing this situation. And she goes, oh, this is so sad for all the people who run the Superdome in New Orleans. This is so embarrassing. Yeah. And how can you feel for somebody else in that time? Well, that's real empathy. And I was very impressed by her personally in terms of how she did it. I could not manage that sort of empathy out of that situation.
No, I mean, it was a long ride. Those early Harbaugh and Flacco years were great, but they also had some crushing playoff disappointments. And this was sort of the vindication of all of that, and also a vindication of some long legendary Ravens careers, which had up until that point gone unrewarded, right? Like, it's nice that Ray got his second, but Ed Reed didn't have, a Super Bowl. Terrell Suggs, Haloti Ngata. Like, this game meant a lot to those of us who grew up watching and loving those players.
Yeah, the Ravens have been kind of fortunate. They had their Super Bowls 12 years apart. So most of the players, that have been superstars in Ravens history were involved in one of those two games. Ray happened to be involved in two, and Matt Stover missed out the second, but Justin Tucker got in the second, and that was really nice. But most of the great Ravens of all time who were here for a lot of years were involved in one of those two games, with Todd Heap being the notable guy who missed out in terms of his career, not hitting on either.
Yep.
All right, I'll go down to number 2 now. How about the kickoff return by Jermaine Lewis that answered the kickoff return by Dixon in Super Bowl 35? A great individual play there, by the way. Lewis came out, fielded the ball, I think around the 16-yard line. I think it was an 84-yard return, if I recall correctly, from Dalwiso. But the player the couple players that made the play, well, the biggest one. Let me get to that because I'm forgetting who the fullback was who made the block. But there was on the right sideline, Corey Harris is ahead of that play and effectively takes out 3 people with 1 block. Now they're kind of all diving for Lewis at the sideline, but he blocks one guy who dominoes into another, who dominoes into a third, kind of thing. If you go watch that play again, watch Jermaine Lewis tiptoe that right sideline, watch what Corey Harris does to improve that situation for him. It's kind of a remarkable thing. I would think that play would be the highlight of Corey Harris's career. And he had some big plays for the Ravens, no doubt about it. But I would think that play, particularly what he did on it, was very special to him.
Yeah, it's also a little bit underrated because of how lopsided the score was in the Super Bowl. But, I think if you were watching the game live as a Ravens fan and you were in this moment of euphoria and all of a sudden the Giants have a kick return for a touchdown, you start to think the worst, right? You're sort of dealing with it the same way that we were dealing with it when the lights went out in New Orleans. You're like, okay, this is how they get back in it. If they're getting back in it, this is how it's happening. And so when Jermaine Lewis returned this kick, I mean, it sort of just was the punctuation at the end of the sentence. You're like, okay, the door's really shut.
Very much so. And I thought the Dwayne Starks interception, which was only like 36 seconds earlier, but the Dwayne Starks interception had put the Ravens up 17-0 as he's returning that ball. I'm saying Super Bowl champions. That's the Super Bowl right there. And then Dixon returned the kick. And at 10 points up, I didn't really have that same fear, but it was right around that time that Trent Dilfer was also headed to the clubhouse, which meant Tony Banks was going to come into the game. And while the Ravens had not given up a 10-point lead or anything like it during the season, they had protected every time, not like the Ravens of the last couple of years and some of the problems they've had doing it. There was not. I don't think there was a lot of risk at a 10-point, but it was an exclamation point. It was like, no, you don't. We're back up 17 right now, and that was the end. And then the Ravens really. Tacked it on after that with a 10-point fourth quarter.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so you and I both agreed that the number one kick return would be the return of the blocked field goal by Anthony Mitchell in the 2000 divisional round against the Titans, which was just that was really the Ravens Super Bowl, right? The Titans were the other most dominant team and dominant defense in the entire NFL. And I think there was a real feeling that if we got past that, got that monkey off our shoulders, that we probably, stood a great chance to win it all, which proved to be the case. But first we had to get past the powerhouse that was the 2000 Tennessee Titans. And a lot of people will give credit to Ray Lewis's pick six, which is a great play, of course. That did end up sealing the game, ending any potential comeback from Tennessee. But people don't remember the game was tied 10-10 when Anthony Mitchell returned the blocked field goal for a touchdown and gave us the lead. And that happened before Ray Lewis, sealed the game. So this was the huge momentum swing.
Yeah, it was a possibility of being down 3 to being up by 7, and neither team really had a lot of success moving the ball. But what success there was by the Titans in this game. The Ravens had 5 first downs, I believe, in the entire game. So, it was a miserable offensive day for the Ravens. Their entire offense pretty much in this game came down to one long pass to Shannon Sharp down the left sideline, which got him within range of the game-tying touchdown early. It's actually quite similar to the 2008 game in a lot of ways. The Ravens had a lot more going on offense that day, still not very much. But very similar because the Ravens' whole first half offense in that game was a long pass to Derek Mason for a touchdown. But then they scored on special teams. They scored on defense, of course, to put that game away. And that was just it was my most fun day of football. And that individual play, forget all kick returns and whatnot, is the biggest play in Ravens history prior to the Mile High Miracle. And it's the Mile High Miracle got the game tied too, and I think you can make the claim that this did more for the championship chances, the Mitchell field goal return, than even the Mile High Miracle did. But without the Mile High Miracle, they wouldn't have won it in 2012, and they did. So people have revise their thoughts about the thing, and they think that the Mile High Miracle is more important, and the Mile High Miracle is definitely cooler in terms of exactly what happened.
Yeah, for sure. And all, you get the double overtime aspect of it. Like it's, a very cool, very, very cool moment. But, Anthony Mitchell returned it 90 yards, gave the Ravens first lead of the day, a lead which they wouldn't relinquish. And, without it, we might only have one Super Bowl. So
there you go. Well, we wanted to talk about a couple topics today. I think we're still going to try here, but we need to go a little quicker on these ones, and we're just revel in that topic because, Slava, you clearly have a similar affection for Ravens history to me, and that's why I really appreciate, one of the reasons why I really appreciate doing the show with you. So always fun to do that kind of thing. But you mentioned this one also is the Ravens self-scouting their own deep passing game. And I think there were some things that came out of this game, but it's your topic again. Give me some of your initial ideas about what they can take from this game and maybe what's serious and maybe what's not as well.
Yeah. It seems funny to be picking on the deep passing game if you just looked at the box score, but I think at this point you sort of look at the Ravens' deep passing game and think it's dysfunctional.
If you found $100 bill on the ground, you wouldn't walk past it. So don't pass up on a chance at easy cash with MyBookie. MyBookie has the biggest online selection of odds and contests to fill all your sports betting needs anytime, anywhere. So you can turn that sports knowledge into cash in your wallet. Bet the NFL, college bowl games, or play for a share of big cash prizes in weekly blackjack tournaments. And if you've been waiting for the right time to get in on the action, that time is now. Make your winning move today. Sign up at MyBookie and use the promo code RAVENS to claim your deposit match, redeemable up to $1,000. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your bonus. Experience the thrill of sports betting right from the comfort of your home. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.
If you just looked at the two blown coverage passes, I think it was Likely and then OBJ.
Mm-hmm.
Lamar actually throws those pretty short. In particular, if you look at the pass to Likely, he threw it so short that it almost gave, not short enough that Likely had to come back to it, but that Likely couldn't continue going forward. And it almost gave defenders opportunities to catch up to Likely. Mm-hmm. And he was, it was complete blown coverage, nobody near him. Lamar should have been pretty confident to put a little bit more air under that thing. And so, I kind of put that on Lamar, like not having the confidence. I don't know where this lack of confidence is coming from, whether it's a lack of confidence in his own ability, whether it's a lack of confidence in his receivers or the play call or whatever. But play call doesn't really even come into it. It's a blown coverage and your guy's open, wide open. So, it's just something is not connecting. And then you look at something a little bit more like the touchdown pass to Zay Flowers on 3rd and 17, which is more of one of those like line drive lasers, and that's just absolutely perfect. So, the question is, can we diagnose what's wrong with this deep passing game, or do we sort of go the route of what Kansas City has done over the past couple of years and sort of like implement more of a effort on short and intermediate passes that Lamar seems to be hitting quite well? You still need to have deep passes in your repertoire, but I don't know the answer.
I think some of the criticism you've got is fair there. And both balls, the ball to OBJ even more underthrown in terms of having to come back for it, and he underthrew the interception in the which was one of the other of 9 long passes that he threw in the game. I'm not as critical as the one on Likely. I think that he had to throw that with the highest probability that ball is caught. That's the most important thing. So an underthrow on that ball when there's no underneath defender of any sort is okay to me. It's just you can't underthrow the receiver, but you can underthrow and make the receiver slow down and get the football and take a risk on not scoring the touchdown. Of course, Likely very effective on the yards after catches. He has been these last couple of games in terms of rolling through for a lot of yak. There's some things about this game that made it an incredible opportunity for deep passing. So you had absolutely perfect passing conditions on Sunday, which seems funny given the rain, but here's what we had. We had rain, and it was moderate at times, and it was straight down rain. No wind to speak of at that stadium. There was fear that wind would be in the 15-mile-an-hour range. I was there. I'm telling you, there's nothing there. The flags didn't even move on that goalpost, in part because they're probably adhering to it with the wetness of what they were. But there was basically no wind. The ball was not wind impacted during the game. But what that meant is the field was very slippery. Pass rushers, in particular, to start with, having a very hard time making the hard steps that they needed to get the power off that wet field to make angular moves and moves that would help them get to the quarterback quickly. So all of the pass protection was holding up for longer on both sides, including 20 of 45 ATS opportunities by Lamar, which was the high for the entire season. This is a team, you're facing Aaron Donald. You expect to have some pressure situations occur. Lamar exploited those fairly well for 10.6 yards per pass. one of the interesting things about the Ravens defense is they had a very similar number. It was over 40% for Stafford, and he only threw for just over 6 yards per pass on his ATS throws. So it's one reason why I don't really think the Ravens pass defense is broken coming out of this game. The other thing was, when you have extended play times like that, you have an extra opportunity for the route to be fully run by the receivers. Well, what does that mean? They get to the top of the stem, they make their move, they try and juke the defensive back, and they have an opportunity to affect him. And that's something several of the Ravens receivers, Bateman, OBJ, do very well. We obviously have Flowers, who's an extremely sudden athlete who can also lose someone. So the more of that you have, the more you have a chance to get open receivers late in the play. Lamar had a lot of that. I don't think he was perfect by any stretch in this game. I thought he actually was just a slight amount ahead of his opportunity set for the game. But I think there were things to look at that you'd say this was a good day for the intermediate and long passing game.
Yeah. In particular, that 20 to 15 to 25 yard kind of range was very effective. But those, they've got to connect on some of these long bombs because at some point the game might come down to one of them. So they got to figure it out.
I had one extra thing to ask you about this. How much does Monken have to take a page out of the Nelson Aguilar playbook now with regard to how to design routes that specifically create unselfish receiving, dragging of safety attention away from the play? Aguilar, as that's described, as you can see it, and as Aguilar's reaction would tell you on the sideline after the play, was his idea. Okay, so you got Lamar confirming it. The only person who hasn't said, yeah, it was Aguilar's idea is Monken. I haven't heard him, come to the fore and do that. But Aguilar, saying I'm going to run right at that safety and I'm going to take him out of the play. That's just, that's a receiver who understood the whole set of route combinations that were going on at that point. It's just, I'm shocked that a wide receiver and not a coach is the one figuring out what needed to happen on that play and on the field in real time. And by the way, this is another page in the on-field smarts thing that goes in the Roquan Smith late tackle at the 2-minute point, and in the opposite side of Flowers going down, or the fair catch by Flowers against the Colts, those kind of things. It really helps to have players who understand what's going on right on the field at the same time, and not just to them.
So a couple things. It was very cool to see Lamar immediately giving Nelson Aguilar credit and understanding that, number one. Number two, as far as on-field situational awareness, Aguilar had a mixed day, right? He did that, but then he also ran out of bounds when he shouldn't have. And then the other sort of important thing is that when Lamar kicked the ball out of the end zone for the safety, that was such a smart play. I mean, first of all, he looked cool as hell doing it. I mean, it was not a good play for us, but he just looked so cool and so athletic doing it. But it was good of him to really understand that situation right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a very smart play, no doubt about it. And I wouldn't have even want Lamar going to the ground, taking a potential hit or getting piled on, in a scrum for the football down there. So that was the way to do it. No reason to try to recover that ball in the end zone when there's no real difference to it. I think we've covered that topic pretty well. I got one more thing to say about it, and that is really happy to see Keaton Mitchell being part of the pass game when he is. And unfortunately, this game might have taken him out of some passing situations because he really had a lousy game as a pass blocker. But when he is in there, he's a guy who runs a lot of the gadgetry, and it allows Flowers to run more deep, intermediate, and deep routes where he's going to be of much more use to the Ravens. So by all means, more Mitchell is good. More pony with Mitchell, was very exciting to see in this game. But Mitchell alone in the backfield helps the Ravens' deep passing game without him ever running a route personally.
Yep, couldn't agree more.
All right, well, let's move on because we've had a great couple of weeks now of watching football, getting excited by game after game going the Ravens' way, and another one with the Titans and Dolphins, and just one of the coolest freaking finishes you'll ever see for a lot of reasons on Monday night. But take us through your weekend of watching football and whatnot.
Well, it just made me laugh again. Like I keep picking on these people that don't want the first seed, number one seed. But it's like, if you pose the question like this, if you were like, if I could guarantee that you would win your first playoff game during wild card weekend, that you guarantee a win and that there are absolutely no injuries, are you going to take that? Yes. Everybody's going to say yes. Well, that's what the first round bye is. Right. It was just phenomenal to see, in particular to see Kansas City and Miami. Those were the two big ones that, I wasn't really, sure about, like Jacksonville also lost. Right. Yeah. So, that one I wasn't as, concerned about, but like, those are two games that those teams really, really needed and didn't come away with. And like you and I were talking about last week, Buffalo was, to me, the stood the best chance of beating Kansas City of their remaining games. So if they were going to lose at least one, that was going to be it. And they did, and it's just like, wow, how many times are the chips going to fall in the Ravens' favor?
They certainly have so far, and it really just it shows that there's a lot of beatability across the entire rest of the conference. The Ravens are the only team which has really looked like they're capable of winning every single game, any single week, and they didn't 3 times by blowing the lead in the last 2 minutes. But they've won every other game, and they really should be 13-0 at this point. So a nice season they're having. I don't think. I hope that fans will at least be happy for the possibility this game is played at home, the AFC Championship game. Season ticket holders really deserve it. We've waited all of Ravens history to get a home game, and this isn't just about my own desire to be. I'd be at the game no matter what. I'll go on the road. I'll go at home, and I followed the Ravens to a number of road playoff games, and I don't have a problem doing that. There are nice things about being a fan on the road, but it's a lot more fun to be celebrating with 70,000 of your friends than with 6,000 of your friends for a road game. So as well as the Ravens travel, it's just that's something I want to do. And the atmosphere in that stadium was just playoff-like in terms of the win over the Rams and the amount of crowd noise. And I think if you don't appreciate that as a fan, there's no need for you to go to a football game. At least, I can't understand necessarily what your need is to go to a football game live.
Yeah. What do you, some people were sort of saying that they would have preferred Buffalo to lose this week to keep, to kind of put a nail in the coffin for them, for their playoff chances, which I can understand to an extent, but I don't think the benefit of that comes anywhere close to the possibility of us securing a first round bye and securing home field advantage throughout the playoffs. What do you think?
I'm in the same place. We'll take our chances with Buffalo if they're the eventual opponent. What the bad situation could arise that Buffalo, I'm going to put in air quotes, upsets whoever they play in the first round, and the reseeding sends Buffalo to Baltimore for the first playoff game. That would be the big negative. So I want Buffalo out, but in terms of putting a nail in Kansas City's coffin, much more important. And what's going on with the Chiefs right now, it could boil up to a higher level. I don't think there's a real chance that Kansas City won't make the playoffs, but right now Mahomes and the rest of his team in part are at each other's throats a little bit about what's going on. And the behavior after the game, we've never seen that sort of behavior from Lamar. We've seen him slam his helmet down, but him to go off screaming at somebody the way he did, I didn't think that looked good at all. And then I think that the Chiefs and Andy Reid are going to have to do some damage control this week to make sure that clubhouse doesn't eat each other alive. So hopefully that's something that messes up the Chiefs.
Yeah, and Ken, I'll tell you, if Lamar did something like that, we wouldn't hear about it until the end of his next contract. I mean, it's outrageous to meet Josh Allen in the middle of the field and just complain to him. Like, if I were Josh Allen, I would have been like, okay, bro, well, sucks to suck, I guess.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I think the AFC playoff picture is going to be pretty brutal no matter what. If Cleveland gets in, they're going to be brutal to play. If Buffalo gets in, they're going to be brutal to play. I'm not that worried about Jacksonville, but given their injuries and stuff, but Trevor Lawrence is still a threat. There's a lot of talent. You could lose to any of these teams. I think that as fans, we have this we're dreaming up the perfect scenario, but you have to deal with the likelihood of things to happen, right? Like for Buffalo to get in, they're going to have to win a lot more of their games. And even if they do, you still want to be the team that was good enough to secure that first seed, and you still want your opponents to not be good enough to secure that first seed. So it's all good things, I think.
Yeah, I do think Buffalo is really the only potentially scary team that they would face in the first game at home. I think all of the other potential wild cards, and I'm presuming that Kansas City is not going to fall and somehow lose the division to Denver, which I think is very unlikely. I'm presuming that Miami is going to hold on for the 2 seed, which is no sure thing, but it's probable. If Miami were to drop to the 4 seed, I think they might be the most dangerous team that the Ravens could potentially face in that first game. Because 2 would play 3 and 1 would play 4 if all the results of the wild card games go according to seeding. But anyway, I think you're right that the Ravens just need to play whoever they play, and it's like getting a bye in the World Cup after the round of the pool play, and you might get an easy game in your first round of pool play, but you never get an easy game in the second. Then it's everybody's. There's no phonies are remaining after that first round of elimination games, and that's where the Ravens will be. So they'll play who they play. They'll play them in Baltimore. They'll be a favorite, whoever it is. They will be a favorite. And that means Kansas City, Miami, Jacksonville, Buffalo. All those teams are fine teams. Ravens will be favored by 3 against any of them, and by more against others. So it'd be something to look forward to in terms of that. I did want to, first of all, let you respond to that, but I did want to go over and talk about what are the scenarios now that get the Ravens in, because I think some interesting ones have opened up.
Yeah, I know. I'm just I'm just trying to imagine what the coolest string of playoff victories would be like. Like we beat Flacco in the divisional round, we beat Mahomes in the AFC Championship, and then who the hell cares who we beat in the Super Bowl as long as we win, Yeah,
I'm not feeling like they have to play San Francisco or Dallas or even Philadelphia in the Super Bowl, but it probably will be one of those teams if they got there. But anyway, if they play that conference championship at home and they take their shot and maybe they win it and maybe they don't, and they'll probably be a favorite because they are the best team in the AFC legitimately right now. I don't think there's any question about that. Then if they happen to lose it, it's a bad loss, but it's not the kind of thing that's going to dishearten me for all time in terms of opportunity. But it will be a missed opportunity if they get the 1 and they lose in either of those first 2 rounds.
Yeah, it'll getting to playing in the AFC Championship and playing in it at home, I think, is a successful season.
Yeah, I have to call it that too. All right, well, let's look at the various ways, because there are now multiple scenarios to get them there, and to simplify it as far as I can, and reducing logical expressions to their lowest order is what I'm trying to do here. If they go in 4-0, they've got it done. If they go 3-1, Miami must lose any game. It could be to Baltimore, it could be to someone else, but Miami must lose any game, and the Ravens are guaranteed number 1.
Huge benefit. I mean, Miami actually has some tough games. I didn't realize this until somebody tweeted it out last week.
Buffalo,
but they have to play, Buffalo and Dallas. Buffalo's playing for their playoff lives, and they just took it to Kansas City. And Dallas is looking legitimately like the best or second best team in the NFC by a wide margin.
Yeah, the problem with losing to Miami and still getting in is that the Ravens probably will not go 3-1 if they lose to Miami. They've got a real risk of losing any of their other games. Jacksonville on the road, San Francisco on the road, or Pittsburgh at home in Week 18. They're all risks of losing a game. So the chance of them winning all 3 is fairly slight if they don't beat Miami. So that Miami game still is pretty important. But here's where it gets interesting. If the Ravens go 2-2, they need all of the following to happen, and they still get the number 1 seed. And all the following is one more Cleveland loss in 4 games. Okay, they've got Joe Flacco at quarterback, and it is Joe Flacco until the end of the earth right now for the Cleveland Browns. That with the way he's played, ain't no way he's getting replaced by anybody else.
Nope.
He shouldn't be. And in a way, Baltimore fans are kind of rooting for him, but they have to get a loss in here in these last 4 games. Jacksonville has to lose 1 game. It could be to the Ravens. It could be to someone else, but Jacksonville has to lose 1 game. Kansas City has to have 1 more loss. That might be the toughest, but I keep hearing from everybody that no way is Kansas City losing another game with Mahomes. They're going to get, well, BS, guys. They've lost the last 2 ball games. They look like a really lost football team at this time. I'd say it's significantly less than 50% that they win their last 4 games, even against a fairly easy schedule. Yeah. And then the 4 things happens. Either Baltimore has to beat Miami, which would take care of Miami for good, or Miami has to have 2 other losses. And as you mentioned, they play Buffalo and Dallas, so that remains a possibility. So the best 2-2 scenarios basically have Baltimore beating Miami and Baltimore beating Jacksonville for their 2 wins. If those 2 were to happen, they actually could still have the 1 seed sealed up by going just 2-1 prior to week 18. So Cleveland will have to lose a game. Kansas City would have to lose a game during that time, but it is a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conventional wisdom, going into even before the weekend is, above all else, we have to take care of business against Miami and Jacksonville. And even though the results of this week have opened up other possibilities, it's still the clearest path to victory. You take care of those 2 games. Then your chances of, being able to withstand a loss to the Niners, as well as, as well as this very, not having to play your starters against Pittsburgh. Now, like, we could certainly discuss whether that's the best option, but
please do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've talked about this a little bit before. And it's going back into 2019, right, where we had just a ton of games where Lamar wasn't playing in the 4th quarter at all, or maybe played 1 drive in the 4th quarter, which makes his season even all the more remarkable because he actually didn't play in so many minutes of the games. And the decision to sit Lamar entirely in that game against the Steelers, and then bye week, and then coming out kind of flat against the Titans. I tend to think that what should drive your decision to make, you just need to have a good reason for doing whatever you're doing. My nephew and I talk about this stuff all the time, and he kind of paints a distinction between the 2019 Ravens and this season's Ravens. In the 2019 Ravens were on just such a historic roll, and they had such a momentum going, and they were so dominant that maybe their tires flattened a little bit. Maybe they lost a little bit of momentum going in, and I don't see the same thing with this team. I think this team obviously is not as dominant as the 2019 team offensively, even though I do think that they can do some things that the 2019 team wasn't able to do, particularly in the passing game. But the thing that this team really has is the defense that I think is so scheme driven, right? And that's not going to go away from, missing some practice. And you can only sit so many guys anyways, right? So if I were kind of gaming out what I thought would be the best kind of option to do it, is anybody who's any kind of injury risk, to the extent that you can sit them, right? I wouldn't play Ronnie Stanley at all.
Morgan Moses.
Or Morgan Moses. So here's where you get into it, right? Like, let's say you want Lamar to play a drive or a quarter or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily sit, all my offensive starters and leave him to TJ Watt just launching into people's legs, as he's wont to do from time to time. but I would limit those guys and just have them prepare, another week of preparation, another week of saying we're going to go out here and we're going to execute for a drive or something like that. I think there could be some real benefit to that. But if you want to say we don't want to roll the dice, we don't want to, take the chance, I think there's a real reason for that, and I think you can hang your hat on that and be proud with that decision.
It could be a Malik Cunningham game in the fourth quarter if the Ravens get to it, and frankly, the Ravens could be highly incented to lose that game to Pittsburgh. Now, the big scenario that I would look at is they might want Buffalo out and Pittsburgh in. I would.
Yes, absolutely. 11 times out of 10.
Yeah. So anyway, that's they could well be in a position where they want nothing to do with Buffalo, and they even though the familiarity and contempt that goes between the Steelers and the Ravens, and also giving the Chiefs kind of an easier first game if that's who plays them, Chiefs or Miami, whoever plays them, it's an easier game to play Pittsburgh. I would say it's also a very physical game for that team, and they would potentially face some injury risk from Watt and the Steelers defense going off on either of those offenses, which those are the strengths of the team. I really think it's a good chance to get Miami out of the playoffs, honestly, if they're the matchup. Right now, Miami does not look like a good matchup at all for Pittsburgh in the playoffs, given their offensive line woes right now.
Yeah, and my God, if there's a chance to keep Buffalo out of the playoffs and put Mitch Trubisky in there,
yeah,
I mean, you do that every day of the week.
Yeah, so it's I like the idea of sitting their guys in week 18, and sample size is part of the issue here. You can't torture the data you have from 2019 for any more information than it actually is. It was one instance under some tricky wind conditions that helped cause the first interception off Andrews, and basically a game script that consistently rolled against the Ravens as they moved forward, and they're forcing them to take more risky plays, which heaped up more of their result from that game into a few plays, including those 4 fourth downs they failed on. It was an unfortunate set of circumstances, and it's not something that I'd say you should be projecting forward to. And there has been some failure. The number 1 seed has had some failure at times. And part of that is that, whoever you face in the second round of the playoffs tends to be a pretty damn good football team, and oftentimes an undervalued wild card team you might get. But it's a risk that you take. And just look back to this last week and Justin Madubuike coming back from a concussion. I don't think that happens if the Ravens don't have this bye week here in this position. And think about all the potential gains from potentially getting Hamilton back after an extended absence. Or being able to rest him for additional time with that knee and have him be 100% or 93% for a playoff game where he wouldn't be for the Pittsburgh game. I think would just be an enormous bonus. So the Ravens really need to make sure they convert this number 1 seed opportunity. They won't have another chance as good anytime soon, in all likelihood.
Yeah, and if you're going to be intellectually honest about what happened in 2019, you go back and you actually watch that game, and Lamar really wasn't. I mean, Lamar had some mistakes, and in particular, like at that point when everything's going wrong, he's going to lay it out there and take some risks. But there were plays where he was hitting his receivers, Mark Andrews included, in the hands, and they weren't secure. Yeah, and they weren't securing the ball, and that led to some turnovers as well. So when you want to talk about like rust or whatever, Lamar wasn't the issue, right? And also, this is why the Ravens have approached their receiving core in a different way now, right? It's almost like a numbers game, right? We don't have all the eggs in one basket receiver-wise, right? The talent is much more evenly distributed along the lines. There are a lot of guys, if Zay Flowers isn't the guy that day, there have been times where the guy has been Aguilar, where the guy has been Bateman, where the guy has been OBJ, particularly recently. So the Ravens are going to have a lot of options. You have to believe in your talent, and I think the Ravens do, and so we'll see. But you can count me as one of those pushing for the number 1 seed.
All right. Well, very cool. Looking forward to it. Slava, always a pleasure to do this show with you. We thought we didn't maybe have enough material. We'd add another topic. We're going to leave that in the green room for another time here. But great talking football with you. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVAKUPERSTEIN.
All right. Other folks out there, if you'd like to do a film study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. Had some great stuff. One thing I'd like to have people on the lookout for, I would love you to send me visuals you see on Twitter. Forward them to me via DM, because I'm going to be doing a series this offseason on great visuals that are available about the NFL that I think ought to be a lot of fun. So forward me ones you see. We've seen some good ones from Sam Hoppen, from Arjun Mehta, and other people like that who've been who've been on the show before. They've been excellent, but I really want to see those as well. And of course, if you want to do a Film City short, DM's always open on Twitter. For Slava Cooperstein, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye, and we'll talk to you next week on One Last Thing.